Haiti is a zero-sum society, which
Zero-sum
makes,
society,
yeah,
okay?
which makes consensual politics extremely difficult to establish. In other words, what I mean by a zero-sum society is that you have a very small elite.
Dr. Fatton, why didn't democracy take hold in Haiti in the 20th century? And I appreciate that one can ask that about many different countries, but you and I are speaking about Haiti now.
Well, this is a complicated issue. I mean, first, we would need to define what we mean by democracy. If you mean
Oh,
simply elections, then you had periods where you had elections. But another issue is the quality of those elections. And in Haiti, you could argue that there was only, in the modern period, only one really free and fair election, and that was the first election of Aristide in 1990. All of the other elections were clouded by fraud, clouded by disputes over who won and who lost. Not and you have different levels in the electoral process. You have presidential elections, you have then the legislative elections, the municipal elections. And in terms of presidential elections, as I've said, the only genuinely free election was the one that led to Aristide's first presidency. Now, Aristide was re-elected, Préval was elected twice, and those probably reflected the will of the population. But the parliamentary elections were besieged by problems and by alleged fraudulent counting, etc., etc. So that's,
well,
yeah.
Dr. Fatton, what if we define democracy differently? And I'm inspired by what you said in the prior segment. You talked about, as we were closing the last segment, you talked about essentially lack of strong institutions in Haiti. I don't even know if the church is any longer a relevant institution in society. Maybe one definition of democracy is a strong court system, a strong parliament, a strong, name it, Senate, and strong police or military or universities. Why didn't they take hold in the 20th century in Haiti? Or did
Well,
they take hold? Go ahead.
yeah, you had some institutions. That doesn't mean that you had democracy. I mean, there were universities, you had medical schools, social, etc. The church was very powerful, but in terms of legitimate institutions that reflected some sort of will of the majority, that has been absent. The country has been
Throughout the 20th century?
mostly, yeah.
Mostly. Okay.
As I've said, the time Haiti is a zero-sum society, which
Zero-sum
makes,
society.
yeah,
Okay.
which makes consensual politics extremely difficult to establish. In other words, what I mean by a zero-sum society is that you have a very small elite that controls the economy. And that elite has tended to be light-skinned. The political system has tended to be for the last 70 years or so, at least since the advent of Duvalier, in the hands of what you might call the black bourgeoisie. And there was a compromise between those two. One has the political power, the other has the economic power. And eventually they fused under Jean-Claude Duvalier, the son of François Duvalier, the first president of the Duvalier dictatorship. He
Are
ran
these
it.
Papa Doc,
Papa
Doc,
Doc and Baby Doc, yeah.
Baby
Papa
Doc?
Doc,
Okay.
quote unquote, he was elected in 1957
Mm-hmm.
and he became a life president in 1964. He picked his son to succeed him. And when he died in 1971, Jean-Claude Duvalier became president for life. And there is an event that really consolidated the alliance between what you might call the black, those are very, it's not as clear cut as I'm putting it there.
Yeah.
But basically, it reflects some sort of the understanding in the imaginary of the Haitian mind, political mind. Jean-Claude Duvalier married into a light-skinned family. And that kind of sealed that alliance between people at the very top of the economy and people who had been associated with the Duvalier political system.
When you say light-skinned family, are these immigrants? I don't
Some
know if
of them are immigrants, in particular from the Middle East, and there is a small settlement. And then you have people like me who are descendants of, slaves and former colonial people, the French or the Germans or the Americans. So there is a mixture. It's a very, Haiti, the question of color is a very interesting question. We have, an anthropologist has studied the matter and said there's something like 27 different ways of qualifying Blackness.
Oh, wow.
So from one spectrum to the other, from very dark to very light skin, from, a flat nose like I have, or, kind of a Caucasian nose, if you wish. So there are all kinds of ways. Your hair, is the hair straight? Is not straight?
So you're considered light skin in Haiti.
Yeah, I would be considered a mulatto. That's why we call them in Haiti.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
I would be considered a mulatto.
Oh, I see. I see.
That's how we call people of my. But if you're in my immediate family, well, you have people who are very dark.
Oh, I see.
So because you don't know, my mother was dark, my father was a mulatto. So when you mix that, you can get something like me, or you can get someone who's very black. My grandfather from my mother's side, he was as dark as a Senegalese person.
Oh, wow. So when we talk about a small elite that was light skinned, and you said it's a zero-sum society.
Yeah.
Let's get back to that.
Yeah.
Is when you say zero-sum, is it because of the size of the elite group that it's just a small clique?
It's a small clique, and people know each other, there are alliances. And not only that, but in terms of the welfare of the population, the economy, it's not a wealthy country. Even if you were to redistribute everything, people would be very poor. So, but there is a group which does very well, and they want to keep that wealth, and they don't want to share it. And
I see.
in the political arena, people who have political power don't want to share it, because politics is a business. You run for office when you have elections in order to use your office for private gains, corruption.
Oh, boy.
So, and this is one of the reasons, once you get elected in the modern period, in the last 30 or 40 years, you do not want to give back. That's it, because you were not that wealthy when you became a senator or a congressman, but you have used that position, and it's virtually everyone, when you've used that position in order to enrich yourself and your family and, your extended clan, as it were. So this is what I mean by zero sum. You're in power, you are going to try to keep it by any means. Because if you lose that power, in the political sense, you're out. And this is one of the tragedies of an economy like Haiti. The avenues to making it, as it were, are virtually non-existent in the private sector, except if you are part of the elite, of that small economic elite.
As you explain all of this, I'm wondering, is there any sort of creed, belief in serving the country?
Well, we had a moment when that happened, and I think, after the fall of Jean-Claude Duvalier, there was a moment of real excitement, thinking that finally, the dictators are gone. We are going to establish a new society. We are going to establish the rule of law. There was the Constitution that was written in 1987 is a beautiful constitution, if only people respected it. It everything that you want in a decent society in a functioning society, in a society where there is redistribution of power, check and balances, access to healthcare, access to everything that you could imagine is in that constitution. The constitution, unfortunately, has been violated from the very beginning, because we were supposed to have an election in 1987, and the military were in control at that time, and they aborted the election. So there was another election immediately afterwards, and the military picked someone to be president, and that fellow, a fellow by the name of Maniga, thought he was smarter than the military. He accepted to be put there, thinking that he would essentially bypass the military.
Get rid
And
of
he
the military.
started reforming, and then suddenly, and that's very vivid in the minds of many Haitians, he basically removed all of the top officer corps, and nothing happened during the day. So he was at his house celebrating, we've managed to get out those bastards. What happens when he's celebrating? Those very officers come with a few tanks around his house. They pick him up and they send him in exile.
Oh, boy.
So, and then we had the election of Aristide after multiple coups within the coups in the military. And that was a good election. But what is also interesting is that Aristide was elected in 1990, and he was supposed to take power in 1991. There was an attempted coup that failed before he was,
It failed. Okay.
Because people essentially block the coup. When they heard that the coup was in the making, in particular, people in the slums came around the National Palace and the military caserne, and they stopped the coup.
That's amazing. That's a great story.
And I see it was extremely popular at the time. I mean, he was genuinely seen as the guy who was going to change the country. And to some extent, there was that vision of a different society. But once Aristide became president in February of 1991, he was overthrown 7 months afterwards. And again, the military and the elite felt threatened, and they would have none of it.
I see. That was a moment that passed, sort of
yeah, and
kind of like a candle in the wind. There was
kind of a euphoria in the country. I remember, especially after the fall of Jean-Claude Duvalier. I mean, most Haitians who were abroad were thinking, maybe we should go back. I almost went back. And I said,
oh, that is awesome.
You know, I have a lot of friends who went back and they left. Some of them remained because there was a vision, well, maybe we can do something now. But very quickly, 1986, Duvalier departs. There's that beautiful constitution of 1987. There's an election and it's aborted by the military in a bloodshed. So after that, people started thinking, this is not necessarily the change that we may have envisioned. But then Aristide was elected, and the so-called Lavalas movement was an extremely popular movement. And there was a vision of changing things and changing them drastically, but that failed too. So
in the minute we have left of this segment, let me ask you this. In 2002, when Aristide was president, had come back, you published a book titled Haiti's Predatory Republic, The Unending Transition to Democracy. That's the title of your book.
Yeah.
If you were to write that book again, perhaps a second edition, would you pick the same thing, transition to, or would you say transition away from democracy after what's happened since 2002 to now?
In 2002, and I was writing it in 2001, 2000, I had some degree of optimism that maybe we could navigate it very imperfectly, but that we could maybe establish some institutions. But by the time I finished the book, I realized that this is not going to work. This is why I have the unending.
Yeah, unending. Yeah.
At that point, I couldn't see where it was going. And I felt that things were not going to move in a clear direction. Now, with what I know, what happened, it's very clear that it's not just an ending, is that the transition has been
Aborted.
failure. Yeah, it's aborted. Although we do have certain things that still indicate that there is a possibility, in spite of the gangs, in spite of the violence, in spite of the poverty, Haitians, to a large degree, can say whatever they want to say, which is a very interesting phenomenon. There's almost
Oh, you're talking
license,
about freedom of speech.
freedom of speech,
Oh,
and that's very interesting. There are multiple radio stations in Haiti, and this is how you listen to the news, etc. And there is very little control over what is being said.
how about the gangs? Don't the gangs control the radio? You can't say bad things about it.
Some radios are under the control of the gangs, or the YouTube, you'll see the gangs, but there are radios which are, I mean, quite clearly opposed to the gangs, call them bandits, violent. So
Oh,
the prime minister is treated on the radio as an incompetent, an idiot, a corrupt. I mean, you hear that. The very fact that the Montana group, which is an opposition group, still exists, is an indication that there is something still there that could be used to generate a better future. But it's
you,
a very complicated thing because those kinds of group or institutions are extremely weak. I mean, there are certain universities that are trying to do something. The church is still trying to negotiate. And actually, there was a very short truce among certain gangs that was engineered by the church. So there are certain institutions that are still in the background, but they are very weak, and it's very, very difficult for them to impose themselves.
but the fact that they can express themselves, that's a huge deal. You can't do that in Russia. You can't do that in, I don't know, China, Iran, name it, many countries.
The very existence of the Montana group is an indication clearly that not everything has been completely suppressed.
Hopefully, more will
that
come
could
out of
be,
this.
yeah. So, yeah.
Let's take a break here. Stay with me and Dr. Fatton as we get into the perspective.